welcome to CEC Gurukul lecture. In the series on economic sociologies, in today's lecture, we're going to discuss on Granovetter's concept of embeddedness. This is from the article published by Mark Granovetter on economic action and social structure, the problem of embeddedness. We are going to try to understand the contribution of Granovetter in terms of giving us this concept of embeddedness, which helps us to understand the relation between economy and society. So, Mark Granovetter inspirational question is, that is, he begins this article by raising an important question. What will economic life be like if people didn't have social relationship? To make it very simple, can economy be understood only as rational, efficient, calculating individual? If there was no social life, can we visualize an economy as such? He was basically concerned with filling the gap between neoclassical explanation of how economic action takes place with that of the sociologist explanation. In traditional explanation, we see two sides. One is of the classical economist who argue that individuals are rational, autonomous being, and they are kind of producing only for maximization of profit. So, they are rational economic being. On the other side was a sociological explanation which was trying to emphasize on culture, norms and the social life. The neoclassical explanation was based on atomized action context, which Granovetter calls as the under-socialized, such that individual actors were basically pursuing their self-interest and social relationship was of no matter. So, individual was seeing just like say a production machine working only for oneself and did not have a social life. On the other explanation was the sociological explanation that made effort to bring back the social structure. Economic activities were completely regulated by norms and values the actors have acquired from socialization. Granovetter calls this as over-socialized. However, we see that the two extremes have a common feature, that is the ignored people social relationship, which is the component in between the two extremes. And this center or the mid path is what can be termed as embeddedness. A lot of what happens in economic activities happens through social structure, and what kind of a social relationship one will have or what kind of a social structure a society will have, on the other hand, also depends on the economic relations or the economic activities. So, basically the idea is to evolve a understanding of the relationship between society and economy. Here, Granovetter insisted that his project was beyond economic sociology. He aspired to develop an understanding of the economy in a way that transcends disciplinary boundaries and thus has little concern about the intellectual origin of useful ideas. Granovetter distinguishes three economic levels to be explained, that is at the levels in which economic activities are taking place. One is individual economic action, patterns of action beyond the realm of individual, and third is economic institutions. Social network connects these three levels. So, what we do as an individual economic actor is dependent on the individual. So, where one is located in the economic institutions. Granovetter talks about the over-socialized and under-socialized conception of human action. Over-socialized means economic behavior was heavily embedded in social relations in pre-market society. This we just discussed was the explanation provided by sociologists. The other that we discussed was under-socialized. Under-socialized embeddedness was not substantially greater than the lower level found in modern markets. In the over-socialized conception, people were sensitive towards each other's opinion and obedient to the dictates of consensually developed norms and value. Here, obedience was not perceived as a burden. So, the over socialized individual as a would kind of depend on the already existing rules and regulations. So, a consensus has been arrived at and there is no questioning of that consensus. That is why Granovetter is terming it as over socialized. In the under socialized, you have kind of limited connection with the society, and therefore individual human actors are seen as atomized, individual. They take decision or their economic behavior is only to fulfill their own self interest, and social structures does not impact the production, distribution and consumptions. For example, in the competitive market, no producer or consumer can influence the aggregate supply or demand. Social relations, especially poor relations, issues like mistrust becomes a frictional drag that impede competitive markets. So, when we look into this whole idea of the over socialized and the under socialized, we kind of see that this is kind of creating a interdisciplinary distinction. So, modern sociology, the over socialized people are seen as overwhelmingly sensitive to the opinions of the others, or they are kind of accepting the norms without questioning them. Whereas, when we look into the under socialized, it belongs to the economic discipline who have argued for the rational, individual, automized conception of human action, and they have kind of disregarded or have not paid attention to the impact of social structure, social relations on the economic behavior. Ironically, despite the contrast between the under socialized and the over socialized conceptions, both have a common conception of action and decision carried out by atomized action. So, what is common in both, whether you are part of the social relations or whether you are kind of completely bound by the social relation, it is the individual human actors who have to take decision in terms of how the and take into account both how his economic decision and action will lead to the efficiency of the society, at the same time ensure that everyone in the network or the social structure also benefits. So, this center or the middle is the where we are trying to locate embeddedness. What is the irony? The irony is that for the under socialized, the atomized actor is the outcome of narrow utilitarian pursuit of self interest. This is how classical economists would kind of give an explanation of the economy. They would kind of look into the utility perspective, on the efficiency perspective. So, it is kind of overemphasis on the utilitarian pursuit of self interest. Whereas, if we look into the over socialized atomized is the result of the behavior pattern being internalized, ongoing social relations only have peripheral effect on behavior. Granovetter argues that the over socialized conception of how society influences individual behavior are mechanical and is an external force. The decision making capacity of an individual is constructed through socialization. So, the norms or the consensus is there. How much of that consensus an individual is going to accept and abide is an individual decision, and this individual decision is not only dependent on his social life, it is also dependent on his economic activity. So, we kind of arrive at a middle position. According to Granovetter, a fruitful analysis of human action requires us to avoid the atomization of the under and over socialized conception. So, the over socialized and the under socialized are the two extremes. On one extreme is the utilitarian perspective, on the other is the consensual agreement to norms. When we look into the middle center, and according to Granovetter, it is necessary to eliminate the idea that actors are similar to atoms and unrooted to a social context. Granovetter takes a middle position between the two extremes of over socialized and under socialized. And therefore, he goes on to talk about the question of trust and fraud in economic life. According to Oliver Williamson, economic actors do not merely engage in the pursuit of self-interest, but also in opportunism. Opportunism is kind of taking advantage of an situation. The opportunity arrives, and at that point that individuals think of their self-interest, and where agents may act with guile and deception in transactions. So when opportunism comes in, or the individual actor is kind of taking benefit of the opportunity, it has to break the trust. It has to kind of take a deceptive measure to kind of make more benefit for himself, or think about himself as an atomized individual. Previously, economists withheld peculiar assumptions about what discourages fraud or force. It was claimed that competition may suppress malfeasance to an extent. Also, as long as economic competition is a civilized matter, it was assumed that it is mostly pursued by gentlemanly means. That is, it was kind of again considered that competition would kind of do away with the question of mistrust, or it could do away with the corruptive measures, and economy, if based on certain regulations, on certain norm, was kind of seen as there was a negation, or there was an absence of any kind of malfeasance. Hobbes argued that fraud or force can't be excluded from self-interest. And the third perspective was the new institutional economist, who represented the under-socialized approach. According to them, social institutions and arrangements were seen as an efficient solution to economic problems. Even malfeasance is seen to be comparatively rare, thanks to the advantageous institutional settings which make it costly to cheat, and which emerged as one of the evolutionary solutions for perpetual economic problems. Such institutions do not seem to generate trust, but merely substitute it. Other economists, however, have acknowledged that some amount of trust is necessary for the effective functioning of the market. Rather, an market, or for that matter a firm, cannot function without some amount of trust among the employees, between the boss and the employees. So, trust is an essential ingredient of economic action. Economists resolved the tension by introducing the idea of generalized morality, which forces actors to remain upright in the face of opportunism, which is the over-socialized account. So, it is kind of trying to understand that you have to be moral, you have to be kind of trustworthy in your business relations or in the firm, and therefore the amount of malfunctioning would be reduced. Embeddedness theory instead acknowledged that ongoing network of social relationship between people discourages malfeasance. So, the embeddedness theory would give significance to the social network, that everyone is part of that social network. So, if any individual is kind of breaking the trust, or is kind of becoming opportunist, then his or her status, his face in the network would be kind of degraded, and therefore individual would avoid taking such a step. So, we look into the relationship between embeddedness and trust. So, people guide their choice based on past interaction with others, and they continue to deal with those they trust. In social network, the presence and evolution of trust can both hinder and foster malfeasance, which demonstrates that social network alone are not a deterrent. Trust for Granovetter is therefore a feature of social relations and social network. Granovetter says that malfeasance does occur when social relations are absent, But in case of a truly atomized social relation, the probability of it to happen becomes very low. Granovetter kind of is also trying to understand this relationship between trust, maleficence and market. Does a critique of Williamson, whose work he kind of comes out with the theory of market and hierarchies, and Williamson asked under what circumstances economic functions are performed within the boundaries of hierarchical firm rather than by market process that crosses these boundaries. The new institutional economics argue that the organizational form observed in any situation is that which deals more efficiently with the cost of economic transaction. Granovetter says that there is much evidence that show us the extent to which business relations are mixed up in social ones. It is well known that many firms are linked by interlocking directorates, so the relationship among directorate of firms are many and densely knit. So, he is basically kind of focusing on social network, and this is kind of evident that everyone who is kind of say a owner of any firm, or those who are kind of the capitalist, they have a kind of a circle, or they have a network in which they know kind of in and out of each other. So, the network kind of in a way prevents individual from breaking the trust. Business relations often spill over onto sociability, especially among the business elite, and that is where we could kind of place the whole idea that a lot of business elites kind of have get-togethers and social parties where they can interact with each other, and this is a kind of evidence of the fact that they are building on their social relationship so as to ensure that the business can carry on well. So, there is no clear cut boundary between business relations and social relationship. Many a time we see that the individuals who are owners of say certain economic firms have their own family members posted at a higher level. So, it is a very thin line to differentiate between the economic and social relationship. Role of trust and social network. Personal relationship and social obligations are important in preventing deceitful behavior. Replacing trust with institutional arrangements creates problems. Trust is essential for market functioning, and economists introduce the idea of generalized morality to resolve this issue. Social network helps prevent deceitful behavior. People base decision on past interaction and tend to trust those with whom they have positive relations. Granovetter attempts to contextualize economic action in the larger social structure, but also devises an intermediate network level of analysis between two theoretical extremes, which we discussed. And what were the two theoretical extremes? It was the under socialized and the over socialized perspective of social action. Sociologists who use the structural formulation of embeddedness usually operationalized via network models of social structure are also able to demonstrate how the social organization of competition systematically benefits certain economic actors at the expense of others. Granovetter makes the case that economic relations are best thought of as embedded in social network within which trust and cooperation can be sustained. These networks can vary in the strength of the relationship, usually represented by having more connections between individuals. If everyone knows everyone, violation of norms and trust are much more likely to be detected and punished. Disorder is often characterized by competing networks of individuals subverting an existing institutions. So, when we try to look into the idea of how Granovetter was trying to develop his idea of embeddedness, he is going to build a theory where he says that with capitalism, with the growth of market economy, social relations have become more significant, and any economic relationship has to be understood in terms of its embeddedness to the social structure. So, he argues for the importance of sociology in understanding economic behavior, challenging the dominance of economics in this field. Granovetter emphasizes the role of trust and social networks in the economic transaction, showing their significance in decision making. His work highlights the need to consider social structure and power dynamics in economic analysis, providing a valuable perspective beyond traditional economic theories. Mark Granovetter is kind of considered to be regarded as the founder of modern uh, economic sociology. Granovetter and Williamson have different ideas about how the business was operating. Williamson focuses on how transactions are managed within companies and in open markets. Granovetter looks at how social relationship influences business operation. Williamson believes that business have an advantage in managing transactions due to their internal structure. He argues that within a company, communications and governance help transactions run smoothly. Granovetter disagrees with Williamson's emphasis on internal structure. He thinks that social interactions both within and between companies play a bigger role in how business functions. He believed that relationship and networks are more important than formal structure in ensuring business success. For Granovetter, a company's success is not just about its rules and structure, but also about the relationship and network it builds. We kind of look into how he was kind of arguing for a theory of embeddedness by trying to give us an instance of how we kind of get jobs. He is kind of one of the article published Getting a Job, where he talks about social networks. Many a time, even in the modern capitalist society, we know that our social relations, our social networks play a significant role in terms of getting employment or getting job. So, from the concept of economic sociology, we see that Granovetter's theory of embeddedness has made significant contribution in understanding the relationship between economic action and social structure. A lot of further advance in the theory has also come in from Granovetter himself at a later stage, where he looks into the social construction of economy and the social from Berger and Lucas's concept of the construction of social reality, where the concept of embeddedness can also be explained in terms of how we look into the construct. So, the economy in the primitive society was visualized in a certain manner, and the economy and market in modern capitalist society is visualized in the way it has been used to kind of create a relationship between the individual and the society. With this, I come to an end of today's lecture. Thank you.